The sun was little more than a soft gold whisper when it crested the rim of the plains, spilling thin light over a world still cloaked in night's chill. Wind crept low, teasing the brittle grasses into sighs, carrying scents of dry earth and wild sage. Along a fence line that had long since outlived the hands that built it, barbed wire stretched taut, catching dew like strings of tiny glass lanterns. It was there he first saw her, no more than a shape at first, a tangle of fabric and pale limbs slumped against the wood, as if the morning itself had tried to shed an old skin. He slowed his horse with a quiet pull on the reins. The animal snorted, uneasy, hooves shifting against the dirt. For a breath he thought it a dead thing, some poor soul abandoned to rot in the sun. Then her chest moved, a shallow, trembling draw of air. That fragile flutter cut through him sharper than any knife. He dismounted, boots sinking into the powdery soil. As he approached, her face resolved from shadow. Bruises bloomed dark along her cheek and temple, and strands of dust-matted hair clung to chapped lips. Rope bit cruel rings into her wrists where they were bound above her head. Her eyes cracked open at his footfalls, wide, hollow, a startled animal's eyes, but she didn't flinch or cry out. There was nothing left in her for that. He crouched low, voice low and almost tender, like he might calm a skittish foal. "Easy now," he breathed. "Won't hurt you." His fingers worked the knots, rough hands unexpectedly gentle as they freed her from her cruel tether. When the last rope fell, she collapsed forward. He caught her before she hit the ground, arms instinctively gathering her up. Her body was heartbreakingly light, as if hardship had burned away all that wasn't bone and sorrow. He lifted her into the saddle, careful to arrange her so she wouldn't slip. Then he led the horse by the bridle, walking slow across the morning fields. The whole way back he felt the press of her against the horn of the saddle, her head lolling, breath coming in shallow wheezes. The prairie seemed to watch them, silent and wide, as if weighing what sort of mercy this was. His ranch squatted low against the horizon, all weathered boards and memories of other hands, his father's long gone to dust, his mother's laughter now only an echo in the empty rooms. He carried her inside, laid her on the bed where he himself had dreamt out long nights of loneliness. Damp cloths dabbed at the grime on her skin. He poured careful sips of water past her lips, startled at how feverish her skin burned beneath his touch. Days melted one into the next. Sometimes he found her eyes open, staring at the ceiling's cracked plaster like it was the first sky she'd ever known. He asked her nothing. No name, no history. Only offered broth when she was able to swallow, shifted the blankets to chase away the drafts. Outside, life pressed on, calves bawling for milk, fences begging to be mended, dust curling up from the dry road where wagons passed and left him behind. A neighbor woman showed up one afternoon, bustling in without invitation. "Heard you had trouble," she said, eyes sharp but kind. Left jars of soup on the counter, old calico dresses draped over her arm. When she caught sight of the girl, she paused, softened. "Poor child," she murmured, more prayer than words. He only nodded, throat too tight to answer. Little by little, color returned to the girl's cheeks. One morning he found her at the window, fingers resting on the sill, watching as the wind played through the prairie grass. When he stepped into the room, she stiffened, shoulders drawn high, like she expected a blow. He stopped, hands loose at his sides, waiting. After a long, brittle silence, she let the breath out of her lungs and stayed there, spine no longer taut with dread. A week later, she made her way to the porch, clinging to the railing. The boards creaked beneath her slight weight. He sat on the steps a good distance off, mending tack. Neither spoke, but from time to time he glanced up and found her watching him, eyes darker than storm clouds, yet filled with something softer than fear. That night, he left a lamp burning low in the window, its glow a small promise against the vast dark. She lay awake in the room above him, listening to the faint sounds of him moving below, the quiet scrape of a chair, the rustle of him settling by the hearth. It was a new sound, that hush of two people breathing under one roof. Fragile, uncertain, but undeniably alive. When sleep finally took her, it came gentle, pulling her down into dreams of open fields and a sky that stretched on forever, unbroken by fences or ropes. Outside, the moon climbed high, silvering the yard, as if the whole world were holding its breath, waiting to see what would come of this tender, cautious beginning. The rains came sudden that week, sweeping over the plains in low, growling tempests that rattled the porch and turned hard earth into sucking mud. Inside, the house felt smaller for the storm's tantrum outside, the walls shivering with each peal of thunder. She stayed mostly by the hearth, hands folded in her lap, eyes tracking the glow of the flames as though searching there for some private redemption. He watched her in quiet spells, pretending to mend a boot, to stack kindling, though truth was his hands moved without sense, too tangled in the strange ache of wanting to keep her safe. There were shadows still clinging to her, ghost hands that tugged at her shoulders, hollowed her eyes. Sometimes she'd flinch when he drew near, as if some echo of pain lingered in his very shape. It near broke him to see it. One evening, lightning cracked so close it lit every seam in the old house. She startled so violently she nearly tipped from the chair. Without a word, he crossed to her, knelt so they were eye to eye. His hands hovered above hers, uncertain, until she exhaled, a trembling breath that seemed to give him permission. He covered her hands then, warm palms enveloping cold knuckles. Her eyes brimmed, not quite spilling, and he thought that if she wept, he'd hold those tears sacred, keep them as tokens of her trust. "You're safe here," he told her, voice low, rough with things he'd never spoken aloud. "Not ever gonna let harm come through that door." The words seemed to unfurl something inside her. She blinked slow, and though her chin still quivered, she did not pull away. They stayed like that until the storm's rage settled into soft weeping against the windows. Days stretched on, and so did the cautious dance between them. She began to move through the house with less fear, venturing out onto the porch even when the sky was heavy with lingering drizzle. He'd catch her standing there, hair unbound, face lifted as though to taste the damp air. Watching her, he felt something settle in his chest, an understanding that sometimes healing looked like simply standing upright, unchained, with nothing to fear from the open world. It was near dusk when the conflict found them. A wagon crested the rise, pulled by a team gone lean from travel. Two men sat the bench, faces sun-creased and eyes sharp with the kind of hunger that had nothing to do with food. He stepped off the porch, meeting them with the easy stance of a man who'd sooner mind his own. Evening painted everything in copper and shadow, lending a hush to the moment. "Evening," one of the strangers drawled, eyes crawling past him to the house. "Been riding a long piece, looking for a girl. Mid-20s, dark hair. Might have passed this way." His companion smirked, a wolfish curl of the lip that promised ugliness. Something cold unspooled in his gut. He stood his ground, voice calm but edged like a whetstone. "No girl here fits that bill. You best move along before night takes the road." The men shared a look, two carrion birds deciding if the carcass still had meat. The second man spat into the dust. "You'll pardon us if we have a look ourselves. Ain't personal, just business owed." They made to step around him. That was when his hand came up, slow, deliberate. In it rested an old revolver, not raised yet, just there like a fact of nature. The strangers froze. Silence settled thick, filled only by the sigh of wind across the yard. "I said," he murmured, not unkind, but with iron beneath, "there's no one here for you. Best you ride on." His eyes did not waver. The men weighed him, weighed the gun, weighed the house with its faint candle glow in the window. At last, with muttered curses, they climbed back onto the wagon seat. Wheels groaned into motion, carrying their malice off into the falling night. He watched until they disappeared beyond the ridge, then let the breath leak from him slow. When he turned back to the house, she was there on the porch, hands pressed to her mouth. Her eyes shone wide, not with fear, but something more tender. A dawning comprehension that here stood a man who'd claim her safety as his own burden, no matter the cost. He climbed the steps. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then, almost shyly, she reached out, fingers brushing his sleeve. It was the first time she had touched him without flinching. That small, trembling gesture felt larger than any declaration. A promise born not of words, but of breath and heartbeat and shared silence. Above them, stars began to appear, scattered delicate across the heavens. Somewhere out in the black prairie, the threat still lurked, yet under this roof, under this fragile new bond, they stood together. And though neither dared name it, hope bloomed quietly in that soft dark, tender as the first green shoots after a long, merciless frost.